Hey YouTube, it's me, Jim the Giant, and today I'm going to tell you how I would recommend you go about learning self-defense. So, the obvious place to start is with martial arts training. Preferably, you should be doing a complete system which deals with strikes, grapples, locks, and possibly even weapons. Now, I did judo when I was a kid for quite a long time, and it certainly helped. There have been quite a few confrontations where I've just managed to be able to refrain my attacker or just throw them, but it didn't really give me the full confidence which I now have from doing more complete styles. I was pretty scared of being punched in the face. I wasn't very confident with my own striking ability. It didn't show me how to deal with multiple attackers or anything like that, and so it didn't really give me the full confidence I was after from doing a martial art. So I think judo is excellent if you're learning it alongside some other martial arts. That's fantastic. But as a standalone method for self-defense, unfortunately I can't rank it too highly. So before you join a dojo, you really need to do some research before joining. First of all, learn the history of your martial art and what was it used for. How well does the sparring model real life encounters? Those kind of things. So, for the history aspect, to give an example, and I'm sorry to be picking on the capoeira guys, I think what you do is quite amazing. But if you look at the history of capoeira, it was learned by slaves as a method to learn martial arts without actually looking like they're trying to learn martial arts. They disguised their martial art as a dance, and all credit to them. That was the best they could do with what. That was unfortunately the best they could do. But you have to ask yourself, would they have been training like that if they are allowed to train martial arts openly? And the answer is no. And when I've seen capoeira experts fighting against actual competent fighters, it usually doesn't end very well for the capoeira guys. I'll leave a link to one particular video of that down below. Yeah, you certainly could learn capoeira to a level where you could be pretty good in a self-defense situation, but again, unfortunately, it takes a very, very long time to get to that level of proficiency. So also, does your sensei or teacher have a good reputation? They could be teaching a pretty crappy martial art, but if they're a really good teacher, they're going to be better than a crappy teacher who's teaching a brilliant martial art. Also, does the martial art suit your body type? Some martial arts don't suit everybody's body type, unfortunately, so look into that as well. And also, look at yourself. If you've got any long-term injuries which affect your movement, you have to ask yourself, can these techniques be modified to suit you? Some of the really flashy martial arts which involve lots of spinny kicks and things, probably not the best thing for somebody with bad knees to be doing, for example. Also, do some research online. It's very difficult sifting through the tribalistic mentalities of certain martial artists. Lots of martial artists will just proclaim that their martial art's the ultimate thing, and other people's martial arts are all completely bullshit, and that kind of thing. It's quite hard sifting through some of those attitudes. There is a lot of bias out there. It can be very difficult to actually find anything particularly objective at times. But keep at it and develop your critical thinking skills, and you should be able to find some pretty good information. So what good things are being said said about the martial arts you're looking at, and just as importantly, what bad things are being said about it. So, as I mentioned earlier, how long does it take to become competent? If the martial art's going to take you 5 years before you become amazing at it, but in the first few years you're going to be shit. You're probably not the best martial art to be starting off with. So I'd recommend starting off with a system which is quite simple, because this will give you the most bang for your buck at the beginning. And of course, there's nothing stopping you moving on to a more complex system at a later date. Finally, do you enjoy it? You know, even no matter how effective a system is, if you don't particularly enjoy it, if you just can't get into it or can't get your head around certain things, then maybe that isn't the best martial art for you. So there's a few things to be keeping in mind before you start, and of course you can have quite often you can have trial lessons that just go in, have one lesson, get a taste for it, see whether you like it, shop around, and then make your decision. So, of course, no martial arts in a sparring situation is going to completely replicate a real life, worst case scenario fight where the other person or people want you dead. If a martial art actually did that, that would be a very bad idea, of course, because your class of 256 people after 8 rounds of sparring would have one person left alive or not hospitalized. So, of course, there always has to be some balance drawn between realism and safety. As many martial arts, I think, go way too far in the safety direction, and different martial arts have different methods for making them safe. But whatever the martial art is, there's always going to be some differences, and this is a good thing. This is a good thing as long as you are aware of what those differences are and learn what to do in a real life situation as well. So to give a few examples, if you look at boxing, yeah, it teaches you how to strike, but it's different to how you would strike on the street. Wearing gloves changes things quite a lot. It changes the speed of the punch. It changes the mechanics you use for punching. So, of course, in boxing, you twist the wrist when you punch. In a real life fight, you're better off with a straight fist because it's more of a neutral position for your wrist. You're less likely to twist it. You're going to do less damage to your hand. Same with hooks, especially. It's quite easy to sprain your wrist when you're delivering a hook without any gloves on. So, I think boxing is great, but you do need to be aware of those differences and perhaps look into classical pugilism or Wing Chun for learning how to strike without gloves. Unfortunately, the punching mechanics taken from boxing have been incorporated in other martial arts such as karate. They looked at what the boxing guys were doing and thinking, wow, these guys can punch hard, let's copy them, without fully understanding the difference between barehanded boxing and boxing with gloves on. Of course, moving on to MMA. MMA, I think, probably is the best simulation we have for looking at how different styles will go up against each other and looking at quite a complete system in a sparring setting. But again, it's not a perfect simulation of reality. You've got gloves on for a start, not as thick as boxing gloves, but the gloves still are present. That is going to change how you strike and the importance of striking compared with other techniques. And in MMA, a lot of the fights end up with both the opponents fighting on the floor, and this is going to be different in a street fighting situation quite often. Fighting on a very hard surface, which is very different to fighting on a softer surface, and what you'll do against multiple attackers. You don't want to be in a position where you're wrestling one guy on the floor when the other guys are there kicking you in the head. If you're going to take anything from the groundwork of MMA, learn how to escape, learn how to get back up on your feet quickly, because if you're against multiple opponents, this is going to be very important for you. So moving on to general fitness then, I'm going to talk about strength, endurance and flexibility. I'm not going to go into any detail about how to train these aspects of fitness because it will make the video way too long and there's already loads of information out there about those things already. But I will talk about the importance of these aspects of training. Before I go into that though, I'd like to say that if you're not doing your martial arts 3 times a week or more already, you're probably better off just doing more of your martial arts. because these aspects of fitness aren't going to automatically make you a great fighter, but they will enhance your abilities if you're already a good fighter. Moving on to strength training then, of course, strength and having extra muscle mass on your body is very important when it comes to self-defense. The more muscle you have on your body, the more strength you have, the more damage you're going to be able to deal, the more damage you're going to be able to take. And contrary to popular opinion, strength training correctly, and notice I said correctly here, it's going to actually improve your speed and improve your flexibility. There's also going to be other benefits such as having stronger connective tissue, having denser bones, which is going to also make you far more resilient and far less prone to injury. So strength training is very important. That being said, however, like I said earlier, if you're not training in your martial art at least 3 times a week, then just do more of your martial arts, because that is going to improve your ability to defend yourself more than the equivalent amount of time spent lifting weights. Now, unfortunately, there seems to be people who argue against this in the martial arts community, nearly always skinny, weak, and don't do particularly well when it comes to tournaments. Now, it also tends to be in martial arts where they have weight categories, which is most of them. But yeah, when there's weight categories involved, this advice does change slightly. If you put on too much mass, you're going to be fighting against bigger opponents, and you're going to be more likely to have your ass kicked. On the street, however, the more muscle mass you have, the better, because your opponent isn't going to magically scale up to your weight or scale down to your weight. So having that extra muscle there, that extra force, that extra resilience is going to do nothing but good things for you. Now, beyond a certain point, it can offer diminishing returns. It can even be negative once you get to the stage where you have so much muscle on your body, it starts drastically affecting your endurance. You know, when you can't get enough oxygen into your body to feed your muscles, that is going to be a problem. But the level this happens at is far beyond the level most people think it is. It's far beyond the level that basically anyone on the planet can achieve without taking a lot of drugs. So don't worry about getting too muscular. So endurance, I hate this myth, but quite often you hear the myth that a fight on the street only lasts about 8 seconds, so you don't need to train your endurance. I don't know where the source of this comes from, but even if it's true that that's the average, fights can last an awful lot longer than that. I've had fights which have lasted for quite a few minutes. So the fact that the average fight is very, very short doesn't mean that you shouldn't be prepared for a fight which will last a lot longer. And of course, somebody could start a fight with you when you're already in a position where you're particularly fatigued. So improving your endurance is very, very important. You will develop this somewhat anyway, just from doing your martial arts training. You know, you're used to training for an hour and a half, 2 hours, possibly even sparring for 20 or 30 minutes in a row. But extra endurance work is going to help you. You're going to be able to train longer and harder at your full ability, and you're not going to have your form breakdown due to you being distracted by being out of breath. Finally, flexibility. I don't do enough flexibility work. Most people don't do enough flexibility work. I find it boring as hell, but I do try to do it at least 2 to 3 times a week. Flexibility is very important for injury prevention. I had a fight once when I was in school, fighting against 2 guys, and I was looking backwards and forth because they were on different sides of me. I ended up pulling my fucking neck, from turning my neck, and I lost the fight because I pulled a muscle because I didn't do enough flexibility work. It has nothing to do with anything they did, and it's pretty embarrassing when shit like that happens. I've also lunged too far in attacks before, and I've ended up slipping. And luckily, I do flexibility work for my legs. But if I didn't, I would have pulled a muscle really badly there and probably been out of action for a week or so, rather than just having a little bit of a twinge, which I was able to walk off and carry on fighting. So, very, very important as well. Finally, offense versus defense. Now, of course, there are times when you do need to go on the offensive if you're backed up against a wall, or if you're fighting multiple opponents, or if you're fighting a controlled fighter who's got much longer reach than you. Then yeah, you need to go on the offensive. You need to be able to close distance and attack. So offense is of course necessary for self-defense from time to time. But overall, I prefer more of a defensive strategy. Defensive doesn't mean that you're not attacking, you're just simply attacking once the other person has left themselves open, and you're fighting in a way where you're trying to avoid being hit at all costs. So yeah, overall I prefer a defensive strategy, and not only does that apply to the fight itself, but the environment surrounding the fight and the situation leading up to it. You're best off trying to avoid the situation at all altogether, or trying to talk the person down. Even running if necessary. But there are times when we do need to fight, and when it comes to that situation, I prefer to take more of a defensive stance. Not only if you're taking the defensive stance, if you can avoid being hit for 10 seconds, you've got a greater chance of being able to talk the other person down, or the other person simply giving up. Maybe they're just having a bad day, and after venting a little bit of anger trying to hit someone, they calm down. That seems to have been my experience for the most part. Also, I just want to go about my day. I'm not a sadist. I don't enjoy smashing people's skulls or anything like that. I'm not going to put someone else's safety above my own if they're trying to attack me. If I really have to smash their skull, I'm going to do it. But I'd rather avoid being in that situation. I'd rather, I'm also going to be unambiguously on the correct side of the law there. If there's witnesses, they'll say he was the other guy attacked him. He was just trying to defend himself. If it's caught on CCTV, you're most likely you're going to be all right. So taking a defensive stance leads to less consequences. If the fight fizzles out because the other guy can't hit you, they're less likely to want to get revenge on you or get their big brother involved or any of that shit than if you pummeled their face into the ground. So less repercussions is fantastic. As for defensive fighting itself, now this certainly isn't the only way to fight defensively, but it is certainly an effective method. This I've learned primarily from reading George Silver's Paradoxes of Defense, and a brief instruction on my Paradoxes of Defense, which I'll link down below, written in the late 1500s, but a lot of it is just as valid today as it was then. It did focus on weapons, but the advice does apply to hand-to-hand combat as well. So I'll go over some brief defensive methods you can use. Now, if the fight was on and there was no way out of it, I like this stance, nice classical pugilism stance. So from the side, you have it like this. If the fight isn't completely certain to be breaking loose, rather than having the fists closed, hands open, and you've got the I don't want any trouble mate sort of stance. You know, you're not being threatening, you're just sort of being defensive. When you're like that, people, it's going to at least make them want to stop for a few seconds minimum before they attack. Once the fight's on and there's no getting away from it, closed fist. So there's three ways you can attack from a defensive stance. You can attack when the opponent's on their way in. So if somebody's throwing a hook to me here, you can jab out, block the head there, tuck the head in, and with a straight arm, of course, you've got more reach. Their arm bent like that, you've got more reach than them. You're hitting them as they're on their way in. You can also block and riposte, or simply counter attack. So block that way and hammer fist in. So like that. If they're coming from my body, I might block there, and then that one's called the chopper. So you can either hit them as they're on their way in, block and hit them back, or you can simply step back and as their attack goes past, hit them after. So either attack them on their way in, block and counter attack, or dodge, wait for their attack to go past, and counter them. They're the three main ways you would use to defend yourself if you're in a defensive stance. And again, I'm sure that's not the only way to go about it. But yeah, when you're in a street fight, it's far more important for you to avoid being hurt yourself than it is to mess the other person up. Getting away and hurt is the main objective there. So thanks for watching. I'll leave a few links down below for you to check out. So comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.